Can I start the show now?
Yeah.
Like, actually?
Yes.
Like, actually? Okay. Hello, and welcome back to A Study in Purple, hosted by WECB, the underground sound of Emerson College.
Hello, hello. I don't know why I always say hello, hello. I hate it every time, and I'm like,
Hello,
I keep saying
hello.
it. Hello, hello. So we noticed that we've been talking about only men.
Ew,
Yeah.
yuck,
So,
disgusting.
So this one is about a female killer, because, like, equality, am I right?
I think it was actually not to, make the female brand too, polluted with these negative connotations of us. But hey.
Yeah. Also, nothing. Never mind.
So,
I think that's all I needed to say.
as always, a little content warning before we dive into anything. Just a heads up, being like, we don't dive into like the crazy gruesome details, but there is stuff. This is a crime show. It gets a little on the iffy side. It gets crimey. And this episode covers like heavy topics with violence, murder, abuse, mentions of blood, domestic abuse, and just other triggering topics that could be triggering to some viewers. So if you are said viewers, please leave respectfully.
Yeah. And if you want to listen to it on your own time, please check out our YouTube, and there you can find not the updated podcasts because I haven't posted them, but the previous podcasts. I also should change this. I keep doing this. Maybe this podcast. There we go.
We have episodes though, so it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So please leave. Take this time right now to leave.
We love you, but like,
goodbye.
leave.
Yes. Go enjoy something else.
Wow. Okay.
Or stay and enjoy us.
Okay.
Anyways.
Let's dive into Dorothea.
Dorothea.
Diarrhea, please.
I was texting Hollie the other day, and I was like, I'm doing research on Dorothea, and it like autocorrected to Dorothea, but then when I sent it, it was diarrhea. Like,
I think that's a lie. It did not autocorrect to Dorothea.
No, I literally checked that it was the correct spelling before I pressed send, but when it sent, it was the wrong spell. How does autocorrect, like, it's just against me.
Diarrhea today.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
And they were roommates.
Oh yeah, this episode is called They Were Just Roommates. Like us.
Yay!
Yeah.
Except I don't try and murder you.
Yeah, you also don't live in my room.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're sweet mates. And they were sweet mates.
I mean, maybe that's more accurate. Because roommates is like one room, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it changes. Because like if you're in college, you're roommates when you're in one room. But then in like when you have an apartment, you're roommates in different rooms. You know?
But that wouldn't be roommates because you're not in the same room.
But
Because
you're not,
roommates would be.
Well, in England you would be flatmates.
Okay, then flatmates.
But then here you're not. Here you're roommates.
Oh yeah, I think that's just an England thing. I feel like I've heard Americans say flatmates.
Am I flat?
Well, because it's all flat. Anyway, let's dive into the case and why you guys are actually here.
We're dealing with the real questions.
Flatmates or roommates.
So we're talking about Dorothea Helen Gray, who later was known as Dorothea. My mom suggested that her name might be Dorothea.
I think it's Dorothea.
I like Dorothea better. Dorothea Puente. Yeah. And she was born in 1929 in Redlands, California.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Redlands, accustomed to maybe blood lands. Anyway.
Redland. Oh my god, that's very like crazy. But anyways, and so she was kind of like a lot of killers that we covered on this podcast. She had a very traumatic upbringing because that's the theme. And
what's new?
Yeah. So basically, by the age of 9, she was an orphan because her dad died of tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
Can't pronounce it. And then her mom died. And apparently she had siblings, but they were separated and placed in foster homes and like state-run orphanages because that was a thing back then. And they were kind of like, you know, back then they were underfunded. There was abuse. Have you watched Queen's Gambit?
Says all you need to know.
Yeah.
Given pills and drugs.
Exactly. And so basically there was like abuse happening, and like emotional abuse and like other kinds of abuse, just abuse all around. And yeah, people think that like later psychologists speculated that because of this like instability and abandonment, she may have developed her psychological issues and like behaviors that she displayed later. Because it was kind of like a defense mechanism for her. She was very, like a chronological, what is it called? Chronological liar? Or what is it called? Not chronological.
Oh
What
my
is it
god.
called?
Now
What's
you're
the
really
word?
getting chronological. Oh my god.
Pathological.
Yes.
Oh my god, chronological liar. She was a pathological liar, and she
She lied very consistently.
because I was looking at this word chronic. She's chronic, and I was like chronological. No, she was a pathological liar. She had like lack of remorse. She was very manipulative, very superficial. Like, you know, she had a dual personality, and she was really charming. She was able to blend into crowds really well, and just, you know, like go unnoticed because she always appeared very charming and very like nice, and everybody loved her. Yeah, so basically prior to the murders, she had a long history of crime, but it was like petty crime because she would like pickpocket people and was like fraud, check fraud, theft. She also ran a brothel.
Me too.
Literally.
It's called Fight Club, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah, and she was she was jailed at some point for like drugging and robbing elderly men in the 70s. But then she was released. And she was released and she started running this she kind of like rebranded herself and started running this boarding house in Sacramento, right? I think Sacramento.
Yes, it is in Sacramento.
Yeah. And she was seen as this like very caring and nice grandmother. Everybody loves her. She was 59 at the time of like when we were talking about this.
She's a doll. She's a peach.
A doll. A peach.
A Georgia peach.
Well, this is in Sacramento.
I know.
Yeah.
She's
Anyways.
a Sacramento peach.
Sacramento peach. What
She's
fruit
a
is
Sacramento Pimento.
I don't think that's a thing.
Is Pimento?
Panento?
Yeah.
What's panento?
Like, it's a pepper.
Oh.
But I can't tell if it's English. I think it's Portuguese.
Oh.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Pimento. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. I was like, am I stupid?
No.
Oh, okay. It says here Sacramento. But, my own notes.
We're so silly today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so she rebranded herself. She was running this this boarding house. She was really like a nice landlady. She was taking in people who were kind of like, you know, the misfortunate people, like elderly, disabled, and just kind of like people struggling with addiction and people who were like forgotten by society. And she always treated them like family. She was really nice, and she cooked meals for them. She provided medication. She like attended local charity events.
She basically made her own orphanage for
Yes.
adult unwanted people.
Oh my god, that's true.
Mm-hmm. It's like
That's a good connection.
It just cycled right back to like her childhood.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but then like I feel like there's a little bit of a twist to it. Like
What? Okay, save it. We'll get into it in a second.
Okay. Well, I already spoiled it earlier. Also, this is a crime show.
Shh.
Actually, we're not talking about Dorothea. Dorothea was a lovely lady, but what were we talking about? I'm just kidding. No, but she was just known to be like taking in the unfortunate. She was really nice. She was like this great lady. And she like I wrote here, she didn't simply kill strangers. She created emotional dependency before erasing people from existence.
Philosopher right there. Well, not wrong. I mean, she like emotionally attached them to her by cooking for her, by getting all this food and whatnot, and
yeah, and it was people without families and like people to care for them,
so nobody would miss them. Mm-hmm. And that's like the real thing that she like preyed upon. So I think it's very true.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything else to add to that. Yeah.
No, that's it. And she was a lovely grandmother.
Very lovely, very well.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's that lovely. She has an alternative side. Between 1982 and 1988, Dorothea murdered her tenants that were in this boarding house that she was feeding, that she was emotionally attaching herself to, that she was developing these connections with. She lied to them.
She lied to them. We're so like into this today.
She lied to them. She manipulated them. They trusted her, and she betrayed that trust. Very Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil right now.
She did. She betrayed their trust, yeah.
And making these connections with these people, like we've been saying, that didn't have any families, that didn't have anyone, that was unloved in a way, for especially like having these addictions, or being elderly and never like didn't have like kids, or their children didn't care about them because it was like, oh, they had like mental illnesses or health problems that the children didn't want to deal with, so they just send them off whatever, and they didn't care what happened to them. And so she killed them. And then basically after drugging them, and mostly using Dalmane, if you know what that is, which I didn't before this.
This word, benzodiazepine.
Benzodiazepine.
I don't know.
Zozapine.
Benzodiazepine.
I've heard it before.
Diazepine.
Yes, sick. Prescribed for usually insomnia. What she was gonna give them chronic insomnia forever. She suffocated them or overdosed them on it, and then would like to wrap their bodies and put them in the backyard. Which, hey, I feel like for an older woman, this would be the decent approach, because think about like, even if these like drug addicts or whatever that was staying in the boarding house, they're a little bit younger. So this was her only way, and building up that trust, being like they could have been into their food that they were giving them and all that. Which, financially, the motive behind it, stole $87,000 in Social Security and disability checks from them since they were staying there, and everything was going to them in the mail. Then it was just like, okay, mine now, since they're dead.
Wait, I'm looking up how much money that is now.
It's probably like 100,000.
Yeah. Wait, that is. Is it gonna show me an ad? It's 335,000.
Okay, I was way off.
335,500.
And a half.
And a half.
Bro, I didn't realize I went up that much from 1988 to now. Damn. Inflation.
I don't know, this site looks sketchy. It's giving me an ad.
Okay, maybe
inflation
get off of
calculator. Oh, maybe, wait. It was 87,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 300. Well, here it shows that it's 358,000. So I don't know, something around that number.
But still, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of damn money. And she would usually forge signatures and send letters of the people that she killed, of the tenants, claiming that they just moved, like, and just maintaining the illusion that they're still alive. If, like, anybody were asked about them, like, oh, they moved. Don't worry.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. I'm just a little old lady. I simply can't do any wrong. And what I find entertaining about these victims that she was taking care of is that they mostly were elderly men and women, and of course being disabled or having that mental illness, having that mental illness, and so they
were like addicts, and
Yes. They were more likely to be taken advantage of in that sense. Specifically, one victim in particular of Alvaro Bert, or also called Alberto, Gonzalez Montoya, which was a developmentally disabled man with schizophrenia, and became kind of like her start. Her first victim.
No, he wasn't her first victim. He was the last
tipping point.
It was the tipping point for her capture.
Yes.
Yeah.
First, last, whatever.
Close enough.
And he was 51 years old at the time, which I feel like is really not that old. Like, that's like... He was about to retire in 4 years, really. But, of course, being developmentally disabled, he fell victim to her past and was found dead in the yard as well. Dorothea was eventually charged with all 9 murders, including victims of Ruth Monroe, which was 61, which was more uniquely, I feel, than the rest, which was her death was originally ruled as a suicide. And actually, she used to live in that boarding house before Dorothea even bought it and, owned it. And so they thought that they suspected Dorothea as committing that crime, which I found is particular of the family, and was like, no, it's not a suicide. It's actually Dorothea. Which is like, bruh, she wasn't even there. Like, maybe don't... She got other problems going on right now. Ruth Monroe. And then we also have Everson, not Emerson, Everson Gilmouth, which was Dorothea's fiance.
He was her fiance?
Yes. And while she was in prison, they were like boyfriend and girlfriend. So they stayed together for a while, even like through the tough times of being in prison and not seeing each other
like
every
the
day.
first time she was in prison.
Yes.
Like when she was younger.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It was
That's crazy.
Was her fiance, and he was found in a box next to the Sacramento River.
That's insane.
In 77, which he old. All love and respect.
Wait,
he old.
she was like 59, right? So he was what, like 17?
I think this happened later.
Oh,
on.
Later on when?
I think it was a little bit of a sugar daddy moment. Anyway. And then we have Liana.
Liana.
Carpenter, which was 78, and also a tenant at the boarding house. There was a lot that was just a tenant, and then were found in the backyard. Same thing with Dorothy Miller. I think, and that's just because it had a really similar name to her, so she was like, no, thank you. Then we have Benjamin Fink, which was 55. Fink, yes. James Gollop, which was 62. Vera Faye Martin, which was 64, and Betty Palmer, which was 78, that were all tenants at the boarding house and were found eventually in the backyard of said boarding house.
Exciting.
I don't know if that's what I would say. But she was charged with all 9 murders. Wild. I think this is even including Ruth's murder as well, even though the family kind of wanted to think it as a suicide. No.
Did the family rule it as suicide, or did the
police ruled it as suicide, but the family was like, no, it's not. It's Dorothea.
We know it was.
We know it was Dorothea. My Ruthie would never do that.
Ruthie was old.
Ruthie was 61.
Yeah, like...
It was probably her kids being like, why would she be sad? Maybe because you don't visit her. Like, damn. So being charged with all 9ers, the authority believes she may have killed many as 15. Who knows what is really in that backyard and what creeps behind those curtains. She was ultimately convicted of 3 due to the issues with evidence in the jury, especially will go into the trial. It's a very long one that eventually came to a verdict on August 26th. But this was all just people that no one cared about that went missing. So it's hard for people to be like, yeah, I claim them. That's my grandmother that died. They would be like, no one cares about you, and didn't have much family to go off of. So it was hard to really direct it to anyone, and nobody reported really a lot of people missing to be able to connect it.
But you're wrong, Holly, because there was one person who somebody cared about, and it was a social worker named Judy Moyes.
Ew.
Judy Moyes.
Moyes.
I don't know how to spell her name. Maybe it was different. I don't know.
Moyes.
Judy Moyes.
But you're wrong.
And she contacted the police regarding one of her clients named Bert Montoya. Earlier, we also mentioned that his name is Alvaro or Alberto, but she called him Bert.
Bert.
So basically...
Bert Montoya.
So she placed her client, Bert Montoya, in Puente or Dorothea's boarding house.
I was going to say
and
Dorothea.
he had disappeared from the boarding house. And when they asked the landlady, aka Dorothea, she was unsure where he was. So it was really weird because initially when he was placed there, he was really happy. When I was doing research, it said that he was happy because he had a TV.
Me too. You know, if we got TVs, it'd be great.
Yeah. But yeah, he was really happy. He enjoyed his stay. But then several months later, he started saying that he wants to leave. And I think he was calling Judy and telling her that he doesn't want to be there anymore. And at the time when Judy contacted the police, she hasn't heard anything from Alberto or Bert for 3 months. So, yeah. For basically when they actually talked to Puente or Dorothea, I don't know why I wrote Puente anymore. It's much more fun to say Dorothea. But
that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. When they talked to Dorothea, she claimed that he left to live with his brother in Utah. Or his family in Utah. But Judy was like, no, he doesn't have family in Utah, so
what you mean?
What you mean? What family?
Why you always lying?
Yeah. And that's when the police decided to go talk to Dorothea. And they went over and they talked to her, but they didn't find anything conclusive. They just kind of had a chat, and she was like, yeah, I don't know. He got up and left. He walked out. And she seemed very charming and grandmotherly, and they were like, no way, this lady is doing anything suspicious. But when they were leaving, there was this guy, one of the tenants, who when they were talking to Dorothea, he agreed with the story, and he was like, yeah, Dorothea is really nice, blah blah blah. And he left, Bert left to live with his family. But as the police were leaving, the tenant slipped them a note. And he was the note was basically I want to talk. And he told the police that there have been strange things going on in the boarding house. Creepy. And
ooh, spooky.
there were strange things going on, and people were going missing, and their security checks were still coming in. And also, there was a strange smell around the backyard. Also, this tenant turned out to be someone who worked in a mortuary. Mortuary.
Was it mortician?
Yeah, I can't say mortuary. That's not a word I can say.
Mortuary.
And he recognized the smell of death. And he was like, there's something sketchy. There's something fishy at the lake I want to fish at.
It's just a yard.
And so after this conversation, the police filed a missing persons case for Bert because they were suspicious. So yeah, and they did a background check on Dorothea, and it showed that she was only 59 years old, and she had, due to her parole conditions, in the last time she was in prison in the 70s. She wasn't allowed to keep a boarding house, so they were like, maybe we should look more into this because this is illegal. And so they came to her house, and they were like, hey, we want to talk to you. And she talked to them, and then they asked to conduct a search. And in spite of not having a warrant, she was just like, yeah, go ahead. You can look around.
How would she do that?
Because I think she was trying to seem very nonchalant. When you're trying to hide a crime, you're like, yeah, go through my phone. What are you gonna find anyways?
I mean, it is the 80s. How much are they gonna find?
Yeah. I don't know. She was very confident.
Poor girl wasn't confident enough.
So she let them conduct the search of the house. And they found prescription medication for sedatives prescribed to Dorothy Miller, one of the victims, if you remember from earlier.
I said that.
Huh? Who said that?
I said that. Never mind, continue.
What?
Dorothy Miller.
Okay. Yeah. So they found prescription medication and like an upstairs in the bedroom, and they were like, "Where's Dorothy?" And Dorothea was like, "Dorothy doesn't live here anymore." And they were like, "Okay, I guess." And then the police asked if they could look around in the backyard and if they could dig in the backyard. And Dorothea said, "Sure, and I will also hire someone to help you dig." And the police were like, "No, thank you. We will dig ourselves." And so they started digging in the backyard, and they were digging holes. I think they dug like 3, and they were really disappointed because they didn't find anything. But, however, luck or unluck struck on their fourth time.
Depends on who you are.
Yeah. On the 4th time, and they uncovered remains of a human leg bone.
Oh,
Yeah.
You know what that means?
Yeah. And they were kind of like, "Hey, Dorothea, we found human bones in your backyard. Do you mind giving a statement at the police station?" And she said yes. And so...
Again, I say, stupid girl.
Well, if she said no, then it's like...
Well, she should have said no to digging in the backyard.
I know. You would
be like, that's just the trash.
Yeah.
It makes it smell.
Yeah, she basically went to the station. She gave a statement. The whole time she seemed very calm and like, you know, kind of just like reasonable. She said that she's only been living at the place, like at the house, for a year, and perhaps the previous owners could explain the bones.
I don't think it was me. No. It must have been the old ones.
It sounds like so nonchalant. Like if somebody forgot like a box of like old cassettes, and somebody's like, "Whose cassettes are those?" "Not mine. I've only been here for a year. Must be the old owners." Like, what?
Same thing, honestly. You know, bones, cassettes.
Like, okay. And then they decided to just straight up ask her, and they were like, "Hey, did you kill Montoya? Because he's missing, aka Bert." And she was like, "No, I didn't." Like, very calmly, she denied it.
Must have been the old owners.
Yeah, must have been the old owners. She denied it, and they had no reason to detain her, so they let her go back home. However, the next morning, they continued the search. They were digging around in her backyard, and around like 9-something a.m., Dorothea came out of the house, and she was like, "I need to go to the coffee shop to get coffee." And since the police had no evidence against her, or just like pointing to her being the killer, even though like you found the leg bone in her backyard.
No, but she's only been there for a year. Must have been the old owners.
They let her go. They were like, "Yes, go get coffee."
She was like, "Oof, this is draining me. I gotta bump my cholesterol over here."
So they let her go, and she went to the coffee shop. However, 15 minutes later, they found a body covered in tarp, and based on the tarp and the state of the body, they realized that it hasn't been in the ground for that long.
Must have been the old owners. They came back.
See, that's how they realized it wasn't the old owners, because it wasn't in the back in the ground for too long.
No, the old owners came back and buried the body there.
Yeah, they did. So they were like, "We gotta go pick up Dorothea at the coffee shop." But when they got to the coffee shop, she wasn't there.
Whoa, who suspected that?
Crazy.
You let a suspected
Yeah.
murderer go. Wow.
Yeah, and when they asked around, turns out she got in a taxi, and which took her to a bus stop, and she boarded a bus to go to LA and disappeared, and they couldn't find her. And they kind of like declared a nationwide
These police
search
really
for her.
couldn't track down a 59-year-old woman.
Also, they could have like been like, "Hey, don't go anywhere. We're currently digging up bones in your backyard."
Lol. Literally 15 minutes later. They waited 15 minutes.
15, yeah.
1-5.
Yeah, so they couldn't find her, but they kind of continued searching for evidence in her house, in her backyard. They found, they found the last body that was in a tarp under a slab of, it was like cement or something.
Yeah.
And it looked weirdly out of place when they found it. So they were like, they looked around the yard and they noticed that everything is kind of weirdly out of place. Like there's a shed that's built very like hastily and there's like everything's out of place. And so they started digging under the stuff that seemed to be out of place. And turns out that's where the bodies were.
Oh my goodness! Who would have thought? The owners are so peculiar.
Yeah, really crazy. So, yeah, under each thing there was a body. And they uncovered 7 bodies, I think by the end of the day or like by the end of the search. They also began interviewing the neighbors and being like, hey, they're bodies. Your neighbor's yard? Notice anything? And none of the neighbors had anything negative to say about Dorothea. They refused to accept that she was in any way involved in this crime. They all thought she was sweet, charming, and they were just like, this is weird. Why would you think it was her?
She's just a little old lady.
Yeah, she's just a little frail old lady. What do you mean she killed someone? And so, it was also, they were trying to identify the bodies, but it was too, like, there were too, you know, it was been a while since they were in there, so it was difficult to identify them. Also because they were, first of all, because they were, like, decomposing, they had no fingerprints, so they couldn't identify them that way. Mm-hmm. And also because they were old, they had no teeth. So, and that's, like, the second way you identify bodies. Mm-hmm. And so they had to, like,
or dentures.
Yeah, they had to use, like, a different method of identifying who these people were, which took longer, and they couldn't really claim, like, they couldn't really figure out who everyone was. However, all deaths have been ruled homicide because of the circumstances.
What?
Because typically when somebody dies, you don't bury them in your backyard. I don't know. Crazy.
I did that to my goldfish.
Hot take. Your goldfish is not. Okay. So they also did a search of her house and they found sedatives, twine, and I think, duct tape. Mm-hmm. And I think they found more tarps.
Yes. And
they also found that
old owners, by the way. Old owners.
Yeah, it was all old owners. It was in a box with the cassettes. They also found that these people are so loud. They also found that she insisted on collecting the mail. And nobody questioned that because all of the people in her house were just kind of like elderly people with like disabilities and mental issues.
Dorothea's just being sweet.
Yeah.
She's just being nice for us because we can't make it to the mailbox because it would take us till the afternoon to do so.
Yeah. Apparently she claimed that it would trigger them and she didn't, and she was just gonna pick up the mail and that was fine. And apparently at this point she was collecting like 10 to 12 checks a year for people who weren't even living there. So, yeah. Eventually they found Dorothea in a motel in LA because she, like, somehow ended up on TV. I think she committed another petty crime. And,
imagine calling the police to be like, there's a 59-year-old out here stealing my wallet.
It's like the grandmother from Madagascar. But yeah, they took her into custody. And I lost the spot where I was. But they still had no physical evidence to connect her to all the crimes. And yeah, they just, they had her in custody and they thought it was her, but they had no evidence. Also, one of the victims was eventually identified as Bert Montoya, so he did not move away to live with his family in Utah, unless Utah was in Dorothea's backyard.
No, the old owners is the one that told Dorothea that he moved to Utah. Yeah. Come on, guys. Get with the program. Basically, the way they identified the bodies eventually is the police put together a list of everyone who received security checks, who ever lived at Dorothea's home, and they tracked those people down. And most of the people were thankfully still alive. However, the ones who were not alive, they looked up their medical records, and they looked up and they started comparing it with the bodies that they had. Like one of them, they could tell that they had surgery, and they were like connected it to the
records, and that's how they eventually identified all the victims who were found in the backyard. But eventually they caught Dorothea because they found out that she's been getting this prescription for a specific for a specific drug that's like sedative for many years, and they figured out that she's been like drugging the people. And
The
they were like, wow.
Benazolpine, whatever.
Pine, yeah.
The one used for insomnia. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so exciting.
I don't know. That's what the victims would say.
I don't think they're in Utah.
Yes, they're all in Utah. They went with Bert, and they're all living on his family on a pretty nice farm.
Well, maybe because she referred to them as family, you know? Like, she treated everyone like family, so technically...
Did she in the end?
He did move away to live with his family.
Maybe she treated them like family in a sense because her family's dead. Anyway, so going into kind of like the media impact and how this kind of sourced into audiences, I guess we won't fully get into that. But from the moment, like, the human remains were discovered, it was making headlines. As you can best believe, it was making headlines of this little old lady in this boarding house out of so many years of being, like, held up for petty little crimes. In this quiet little Sacramento house. So front page headlines would be like, Granny accused of grisly murder. Bodies in the garden. Sweet old lady or serial killer? It sounds like BuzzFeed articles. Like, they could have done better. The 80s weren't killing it right now, unlike Dorothea, that was killing. So usually her head mugshot that was very stoic and unbothered, and she was a very poised lady, I would say. Like, she just in her demeanor, in her posture, she was just very I didn't do it. And right beside images of the backyard graves that were dug up, and just creating these juxtaposition between her being so calm and no, that was not me, that was the old owners, and then with these very much dug up graves with these victims that came out of it, and then there was a lot of talk show morning shows, so many different tabloids that just speculated not just on the crimes itself, but the border meeting of no. I don't know what I wrote there. The broader meaning of were there more to women like her? Could killers really be hidden in plain sight? Could other group homes be cover-ups for abuse? The answer is yes to that last one. If we watch Queen's Gambit.
This episode is actually about Queen's Gambit.
Wow. And just to paint a picture for you of what Dorothea looked like, because we've been saying this nice little old lady, if you can picture a nice little old lady of having these snow white hair and her glasses and her soft little voice like a granny. Imagine the granny from Little Red Riding Hood story before she got eaten by the wolf. That's the type of granny this is. Very
Who really
sweet.
Was the wolf?
Whoa, I feel like maybe the wolf gobbled her up, and then she was taking over the wolf's control. And she was clashed with the term of serial killer, which is very unconditional for an elderly lady to be associated with the word serial killer, because you don't think about that and associate it with that term. I kind of go into she got nicknames for sure. She got Deaf House Landlady. Very creative, guys, what can we say? And Grandma Killer.
Grandma Killer.
Which she killed more than just grandmas, if you're asking me. Dorothy Miller wasn't the only one.
Why is it so, not inclusive? It should be Grandma and Grandpa Killer.
Come on, guys. We are in the 20th century. And then, especially during the trials itself, people were swarming, and press was yes, this is the top story right now. This is what we need to be focused on. It's little Sacramento, California.
Why is everything in California? California needs to chill.
Needs to calm down. Yeah. We're at a level 10. We're gonna bring it down to level 2.
California in the 80s was not a good place.
California, period. Not going.
Bro, you're going there.
Shh. And basically these headlines for the courthouse and all these hearings was like House of Horrors and Deadly Boarding House. They really had fun with these headlines. They really were like, yes, this is it. We want to make sure Dorothea really gets painted in a beautiful light. Which, hey, Dorothea was just, I feel like, what was a movie about like there's a few movies about like a grandma that like takes things into her own hands.
I don't know.
Anyway, whatever that movie is, but like kind of started this like new revelation being like, maybe our grandmas aren't as sweet as we think. Maybe they're secretly killing people in their backyards and we just don't know, and we're over here helping them plant petunias. And the petunias are growing because of the new fertilizer.
That's dark.
Welcome to the True Crime Show. And then Dorothea being featured on Forensic Files, Deadly Woman Crime Scene, The Vanishing at Cecile Hotel. Even like another show, which is Worst Roommate Ever, which... I agree. I would hate to be roommates with her. They were not just roommates. They were serial killers. And just her story being shared between like books, podcasts, hint hint, and even like YouTube documentaries that were very popular very well. Because she was special. Because she was different. And she wasn't like the normal serial killers that were supposedly these white men that were just like elderly and like what we've been covering so far. And I feel like she also wasn't of higher class or having that type of social barrier or having that type of, I guess in some way she was perceived as a higher power, especially in the boarding house because of how much she took care of everyone else. That's why she kind of got the respect that she had and why she was able to undermine them in that way. But yeah. And then Dorothea home like 1426 F Street, if you happen to know.
She got an F in street.
Yeah. Anyway, in Sacramento, it became very infamous of the boarding house, and it was very, like, tourist stop for everybody who loves true crime. So if you happen to be in Sacramento, California, happen to go to 1426 F Street,
you hear that, Kevin?
then you'd be able to see where this all happened. It's actually now turned into a rented Airbnb-style property. How great. Yes.
Yeah, not now.
But it was at one point. And, like, wow, I don't know if I would be there if I was, like, I feel like ghosts would be roaming the halls. Like, it feels like it would be so much just history happened there, and in especially the backyard, I would not feel safe staying there, knowing of such history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, the Airbnb property also gave references to the case, so I'm guessing I got hella promotion.
Yeah, it's like a museum, but it's like, maybe let's not.
No, it's not. Anyway.
So yeah. So Puente. Dorothea was tried in 1992 in Monterey County. You know, like Monterey Pop. Monterey Pop. It's the festival in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Anyways, she was tried in Monterey County, because they had to change the venue from Sacramento because in Sacramento there was like too much publicity and the crime they couldn't try it without disruptions. But basically they started the trial in 1992 and it was covered like a high profile celebrity case. There were like cameras, there were journalists, there were people like swarming the courtroom and just like, everybody wanted this hot story, and to see what's happening in the grandma. She was eventually, like, at the end of the trial, she was charged with 9 counts of murder, because I think that's how many people they found like 7, and then there's 2 more. And then she was like, I think was she sentenced to death? No? She was like she faced death penalty. Also her lawyer Kevin Clower. Her lawyer's name was Kevin.
Kevin.
So her lawyer Kevin Clower, he attempted to kind of present this very humanize her. He was really focusing and arguing the fact that deaths were natural, like the deaths that occurred were natural, and they were just results of overdoses, and not because Dorothea killed anyone. And he was trying to portray her as a very like frail, well-meaning woman who was trying to help people, and people just happened to die under her care, just accidentally. It was the old owners. And however, I don't think he won that case, because her fate was kind of decided by media, and the prosecutor John O'Mara portrayed her as a very cold and calculating killer, and who preyed on the weak. And they showed financial records and prescription histories and forensic evidence tying her to the deaths, and it was not in her favor. And eventually the jury convicted her of three murders and sentenced her to 2 life terms without parole. And yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I like that they were trying to argue that she was a frail lady and people just died under her care.
People just happen to die, okay?
People just happen to die under her care. This sounds like a story I'm familiar with. So yeah. Hollie, why are we still talking about this?
Well, I feel like it's an interesting difference between what we now think of serial killers. I feel like I was talking a little bit about that earlier. And how she was just a sweet little lady. Oh, she was just a little one. And yet she was able to do all these killings. And actually have so many people fooled that it wasn't her. Like, even her neighbors, like, all, like, even, like, a lot of, like, people, like, outside of the courthouse and, like, the public and the press was just like, no, can't be her. She's too old and brittle and...
Yeah.
Ew.
Also, the tenants didn't know, like, I'm assuming, because the tenant who told the police, he didn't know that she was killing people. He just said that something sketchy was going on and people are going missing. Like, he didn't see anything, and he lived there. Isn't that crazy?
Well, I think also the fact that they were not mentally well also kind of goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that they're a good, like, person to go off of, because they wouldn't know. They're not fully up there to fully be decided, and I think that's also why a lot of people were going against probably what they were saying if they did say anything bad about Dorothea, because they'd be like, nah, they're just mentally unwell, they don't know what they're talking about. Because why would the person that's been taking care of them and housing them and being able to, like, help them with everything do that to them?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like she had a good cover for, like, what she was doing.
Yeah. No, that was... Yeah. Also, she broke the stereotype of the serial killer, because up to this point, we have all of these, young, male, and violent people who are serial killers, and she wasn't any of that. She was a woman. She was very calm. She was very sweet. She wasn't violent. She wasn't young either. Excuse you. Well, no offense to her. But
she was still in bathing suit season. I don't know what you're talking about.
Bathing suit? What?
Nothing. Never mind.
I don't even know what that means. But she wasn't like your typical serial killer. So people really didn't understand how someone like that could be killing someone, because you always have this very specific idea of what a killer looks like. And it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I wonder where, because I feel like before we always thought that serial killers were like these outcasts and kind of people who weren't like the most attractive people, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why she didn't fit in the stereotype. But then I wonder how that stereotype of killers is changing now. Because I think now, because of all the shows and portrayals, like we have, what's his name? Zac Efron is playing Ted Bundy, and then we have, what's the other guy's name, is playing Jeffrey Dahmer, and like, what's his name? Austin Moon. What's his name?
Austin Lynch.
Austin Lynch.
No, Ross Lynch. Oh my God.
Ross Lynch, yeah. From Disney played Dahmer, and it's like
what a transitioning career, by the way. Anyway.
And all these like really attractive people, or like relatively attractive people, are playing, you know, killers, and we kind of idealize them, and you know.
You mean like idolize them in that way?
Yes, idolize. That's what I meant to say. Idealize
okay.
as well. I don't know. So it's interesting how, like, it's changing, because it always feels like we're shocked by, like, when we find out that someone was killing someone, it's always unexpected. Even though history shows again and again that it can be anyone, we're always like, no, but it was supposed to be the hot guy.
I think that's what media has done to us in that sense, in like these conventional like, TV shows. So.
But I wonder how it, like, in the past, it was the opposite, right? And so it's interesting.
So I think that when we look at media, they try and put good-looking people in front of the screen because then you actually watch it. Stuff like Ross Lynch, like everyone knows Ross Lynch, he's a hot guy. So why wouldn't you want to watch him? Even if it is in this creepy, conniving like way as Jeffrey Dahmer, I feel like that also brings some of the attraction because sometimes we'll watch things because of a certain actor being in it.
Yeah.
Or if some people watch it because like, oh, they look cute, I'm gonna watch. And so I feel like that's why they change it so they're not putting someone ugly on the screen or what they considered ugly. So.
Yeah. But I think the moral of the story is that there are hot killers and there are not hot killers, and there are also grandma killers and grandpa killers, and also really young killers.
Well said. Yeah. It can be any one of us. Yeah. It can be your roommate right now.
Damn.
Trying to work on their assignment. No, they're not. They're planning your death.
It's like an elaborate plan. I don't think it's very safe nowadays, like with all the like tracking on internet. Like imagine creating a whole plan and then being like, I will never get caught. Like, buddy. I'm gonna hold your hand while I say this, but
you've been lied to. You have been lied to. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely something also new for females to not be seen as like a damsel in distress, to be saved, and having that other perspective that like even this brutal old lady can like kill. Yeah. So don't underestimate her.
But also it's like how does it flip? Like how does it shape our perception of killers? Because I feel like when a man is the serial killer, we always think that it's like, oh, like violent, irrational, you know, like all of that stuff. But then when it's a woman, it's very like calculated, and it's, you know, like.
Well, so I feel like women do think more about things before doing it.
Whoa, hot take.
Well, they do. I feel like women are sense more to be overthinkers or thinkers in that way, and like to think before doing, and that's just something natural. I mean, I do that a lot. And men are like, yeah, I'm just gonna do it. And that sometimes is like why women get talked over more in like society.
I mean, but then you also have killers who like are methodical and stuff. Like, I don't know, like I can't think of anyone, but like men methodical killers, and then you have irrational women killers. Like, wasn't Eileen, what's her name? Wuornos?
Aileen,
yeah. She was kind of irrational, erratic, and right, violent. Definitely.
I think in some way, but I don't know.
I don't know. It's just interesting how we view people based on that. But yeah. So this is our time, but thank you for
Joining
listening.
us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Talking about Dorothea
Puente. We will not be here next week on Tuesday, but we will be back.
No, don't miss us too much, guys. Come on.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. If you want to follow our Instagram for updates, it's at whatever.
a.study.in.purple.
Yes, and then we have a YouTube that's just A Study in Purple.
Much easier.
Much easier to find that, where we post our latest podcasts.
Sometimes,
yeah. I will update that.
It's okay.
But yeah, thank you for joining us, and sleep well, guys.
Bye.
Spend time with your roommates.
Not too much.